Welcome back to Grimm's Frightmares. I'm your host, Jess, here to take you once again down the darkest corners of the darkest highways and back streets. And although we visited this road before, don't assume you're safe there. Some legends play out on a much larger stage, over a much longer period of time. These are the tales your great-grandparents told their own kids, who told their kids, who told their kids. Such long-lived tales are common in Beaver County, especially in the little town of Industry. Come back with us. Don't worry. There's no wraith this time. Just the angry boy on Mystery Mile. I'm not normally a person who submits things like this, but when I saw the story from a year or so ago about Mystery Mile, I had to share my own experience there. See, I used to live on Wolf Run Road before Mystery Mile actually happened, but we owned a lot of property, about 6 acres worth, and part of it spilled into the mile, in particular, our backyard. I was only little when we first moved there, probably 8 or 9. For a long time, nothing ever happened to me. But my room faced the backyard where part of our land fell onto Mystery Mile. And I can remember every night going to bed terrified. I was so cold even in the summer when it was really hot out. My parents told me I would get used to it, but I never did. For 4 years it went on, this sense of freezing cold and unexplained terror that I felt. But one night, as the cold once again overtook me, and that feeling of fear engulfed me, I decided I couldn't live like that anymore. I forced myself out of bed and walked slowly over to my window. If something was out there, I was going to see what it was. I pushed my curtains aside and stopped in my tracks. There, on the edge of our property, stood what must have been a little boy. He was far away, but I could see his face as if he were standing right next to me. He wore strange clothes. I didn't recognize the style, but they must have been decades old. His face was pale, grayish-white, and his eyes looked so very sad. I couldn't move, couldn't even turn my head. The little boy glared at me, and the distance between us seemed to shrink. I tried to scream, but my voice caught in my throat and wouldn't come out. The sadness in his eyes was so overwhelming. It seemed to take on a physical presence that reached across the yard and infected me. My eyes burned as they filled with tears, and I felt so alone and afraid. I don't know how long I stood there, but in a blink, the boy was suddenly gone, and the scream that had caught in my throat was unleashed. My parents charged into my room, and I tried to tell them what I had seen. Of course, they didn't believe a word of it. It's only night terrors, they insisted. Get some more rest. A few days later, our neighbor Linda was visiting. She asked how I was adjusting to the house and asked about my room. Asked if I had felt anything strange there. I was hesitant to tell her at first, so I lied and said it had all been fine. I shouldn't have. She obviously knew something weird had gone on here, and probably could help. I went over to her house the next day and told her about my experience. She didn't seem at all concerned. Sometimes people see things there, and sometimes they don't, she told me. I guess it depends on who you are, but this is an old road with old ghosts. Later that night, I was in the kitchen, 1 floor below my bedroom. I was making a snack when I glanced out the window and jumped out of my skin. The boy from a few nights before was standing outside. This time, he was a lot closer. I once again felt like I couldn't look away as he stared at me. But something was different. His sadness was gone, replaced with something else. Something more horrible. Anger. Rage. Hatred. It startled me. I ran into the living room and told my dad someone was out there. He grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and my softball bat from the back porch and charged outside. I watched from the porch as he passed by where I had seen the boy. But there was no sign of him. No sign anyone had been there at all. I spent the next half hour being questioned by my parents. It wasn't like me to make up stories, they claimed. Was it the move? Was it something at my new school? No, I told them time and again. It wasn't any of that. They insisted they were worried about me. I didn't blame them. I was worried about me too. That night, the boy came back. I finally dozed off after spending hours tossing and turning, trying to get warm, trying not to look at the window. An icy cold breeze creeped up under my sheets. In my barely conscious state, I thought I had closed the window. I sat up slowly, ready to crawl out of bed and check. But when my eyes came into focus, they were met with his. I screamed. Before his angry gaze took hold of me, and I wasn't able to do it, I let out the loudest, highest scream I could. And then I stopped. I was caught up again in the angry boy's stare. I could feel his hatred, and it was directed at me. For the first time since the ordeal had begun, I felt like he wanted to hurt me. I suddenly felt myself lifted off the bed and carried into the hallway. My dad slammed the door to my room and held me tightly. He kept apologizing for not believing me. I remember thinking, at least someone else finally saw it too. We slept downstairs that night, with the lights on. No one spoke. It was awkward. When I worked up the courage, I told my dad about what Linda had said. He went over to see her and came back hours later very upset. She had told him that in all the stories she had heard from previous owners and tenants, the boy had never reached the house before, had never come inside before. He called Doug Drexler, the real estate agent who had sold us the house. Doug admitted he had heard the stories, but never believed in them. Nothing serious had ever come from them. We didn't live there long after that. We took a loss on the house and moved into another house in a nice suburban neighborhood nearby. A little less country, but not quite city either. I never experienced anything else like this. Sometimes I still see the boy in my dreams, even though it was 10 years ago. I'll never forget the terror of feeling that other presence in the room with me and seeing the sadness and anger on his face. I found so many others who lived on this road with stories to tell. If you're ever in Ohioville, stay away from Mystery Mile, or you may live to regret it. If you enjoyed this story, please be sure to subscribe below and check out our other offerings here at Grimm Scary Tales. You can also find us on other social media. Just click the links on your screen. If you have a story you'd like to hear us read, click the link to submit a story and tell us all about your own personal frightmare. Thanks for listening.